One of the biggest things that I've learned, and maybe honestly one of the toughest lessons that I've learned over the course of my career and having coached countless leaders, teams, and doing so many private coaching sessions has been that being yourself, truly being yourself, probably is one of the toughest and most courageous acts that there is in your career and honestly probably your life. Because there's a lot that's going on. There are a lot of things that we're dealing with that keep us from being happy, from knowing what to do next, and from just sort of feeling like we're trapped or that we're doing it wrong. So that's what I want to share. Is in this video, I want to be able to try to share what are some of those things that I've seen across some of those people. What are some of the things you can start to look at and to figure out that might be able to help you be happier, be more creative, and hopefully have a better career. Let's get into it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Crazy One. As always, this is the YouTube channel and podcast that helps you be more creative, be a better leader, learn some new applications, and a whole bunch more. As always, I'm your host, Stephen Gates. And look, if you like videos like this, or if you watch other videos and you actually got something out of it, hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell so you get the latest videos whenever those come out. Now, today, I want to talk about making peace with yourself. It is in the private coaching that I do, probably over 90% of the time, the people who come looking for coaching and looking for help are ultimately trying to figure out how do they make peace with who they are? How do they figure out what they want to do in their career? How do they figure out how to be happy? Now look, let's just be totally honest here, right? I know there's a lot of people who have a lot of followers who will tell you that a video like this will be able to help you figure all this out. This won't. I think this is not a substitute for coaching. This is not, even in some cases, a substitute for therapy. Both of which are things that I know a lot of people do, and it is really helpful. What this is, though, is I think hopefully to be able to help you get a start of an understanding of what's going on. And why is this important? Because I think that the reason why this is so important is that if you are creative in any way, if you're just a person, the problem is that a lot of what you've gone through in your life to this point hasn't looked like anybody else. Your childhood, your education, your career, a lot of those things don't look just like somebody else. And so what we get taught is that whenever it isn't exactly like somebody else, maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's a weakness. Maybe it's not that sort of thing that again, is something you should be proud of. I say this because the title of this channel and my podcast, the tattoo that is on my arm, here, let's get it so you can actually see it, upside down, other way, there we go. Here's the crazy ones. It's a reminder, right? It's a reminder to me because I've been through this. I spent too long of my career trying to be somebody else. And let's actually start there. Because I think the root of the problem is that trying to be somebody else builds up over time. Because at our core, there is who we are, just ourselves, in the quiet moments, those sort of pure moments, right? Like who we really are, what makes us really happy. But the reality is that isn't always just the person that we are in the world. As we go to work, as we sort of work with our teams, as we work with anybody else, we just even are with our family or friends or the things like that. A lot of times we feel this pressure. We feel pressured to be who we think they want us to be. Who is that ideal person at work? What are their characteristics? What are their traits? How do I be more like that? Because if I'm like that, then I'm going to be successful. In our own lives, we have these sort of invisible scripts about the things that we think we should be doing, about going to school and getting married and having 2.5 kids and getting a dog and a house and a car, like all this stuff. But none of this stuff is real. There is no right person. There is no ideal person at work. There is no right way to live your life. If you look at my career in reverse, no one would ever tell you to do what it is that I've done and think that you're going to be even the slightest bit successful. But that's the other problem with this, is that success or things like that are things that only happen in hindsight. Right? After you've done it, after it's worked, then everybody knew you're successful. When you go through it, it doesn't feel like that. But that sort of buildup leads to that gap between you, who you are, and then who do you think you need to be? And then a lot of this starts with how big is the gap between those two people. Because the reality is, a lot of us have built up work personas, masks almost, that we wear. And whenever we go into work, we become a different person. Maybe we're more confident. Maybe we're less confident. Maybe we're more outspoken. Maybe we're much more insecure. Maybe the imposter syndrome is much bigger than whenever we're at home. But it's often the gap between those two. And the thing is that the bigger that gap is, the harder it is, the more exhausting it is, because you're not just authentically being yourself. You're showing up as this other person. And that over time, that takes a toll. Over time, that's not sustainable. Over time, you just really have a hard time with that. And there's so many people who I've talked to who are afraid of their past, who are afraid of what people will think, who are afraid of, again, these interpretations and reactions that maybe are real, but maybe they're not. Maybe they just sort of are projecting what they think is going to happen. But the thing is that whenever you're doing that, when you're working that hard to try to be whoever you think everybody wants you to be, the problem is you're missing out on who you are. And that your best work, your best creativity, your best self comes whenever you show up as yourself. But that's why I said before, but being yourself often is the hardest, most courageous act that many people can do, because being ourselves means we need to be vulnerable. Being ourselves means we might be insecure. Being ourselves means somebody might not like us. And it's easier just to be able to sort of make it big and high level, to be able to stay abstract, to put on that mask and put on a performance. Well, yeah, it's easy for a little while. But the problem is that any coping mechanism breaks down over time. You start with little coping mechanisms, little things you want to be able to do. They aren't sustainable. And the further you go on in your career, the bigger those get, and whenever they fall apart, the harder that fall is. And that's why a lot of people feel stuck. They feel unhappy. They feel unsure what to do, because those mechanisms are breaking down. And also just because you get through a point in your career where your talent counts for a lot early in your career. If you are good at something, talented at something, great. That'll give you a really good start. But the long-term determination of your success is going to be your work ethic. How much are you willing to work on yourself, on other things, to continue to grow and be successful? And that's the problem, is that talent starts to burn off as you get further on in your career. Well, the thing that you're left with are the uncomfortable parts of yourself, like those little things that you sort of stuck into the corners of your soul to be able, because they're things you aren't proud of. They're things that you aren't comfortable with. They're those sort of things, and that's definitely then going to be a problem. Well, this is why a lot of people's careers get stuck. This is why a lot of them aren't sure what to do. This is why they need coaching and therapy. And it's good that they reach out to that and have the bravery and the courage to do that. Because we're always going to be our own biggest blind spot. We're never going to be able to truly see ourselves. And in many cases, we need perspective. We need to know, how are we doing? Are we doing better or worse than other people? Is this something that is healthy? Is it not healthy? Because again, we've built up coping mechanisms and other things that are going to maybe influence the way that we see the world. So here's the starting point that I ask most people to do. Is that all I ask them to do, simply, and you can do this and just record it and play it back for yourself. You can do it to a significant other, family member, friend, something like that. But what I want you to do is I want you to sit down and I want you to tell them about 4 things. I want you to start off by telling them about your childhood. Was it happy? Did your parents stay together? Did you live in a good neighborhood? Were you proud of where you went to school? Did your parents get a divorce? Did you maybe not finish school? Were there things that in there you felt like weren't a part of what that script should be? And start there. And from there, what I want you to then go on is to talk about, because whenever you get into work, talk about your education. I'm glad to see this doesn't mean as much as it used to. But here again, did you go to school at some place somebody would have heard of? Someplace you were proud of? Was it Ivy League? Did you do something like that everybody who always went to those schools can't stop talking about? But again, are those sort of things? Or maybe, like I said, did you not go to school at all? Did you maybe not finish like me? Was there something that, again, maybe isn't the thing that you think a lot of people are going to admire or be able to really be happy about? Then I want you to go on and to tell them about your career. Where have you worked? What have you done? Have you felt good about it? Do you feel like it's been sustainable success? Maybe you stumbled along the way. But just again, tell them about your career. And then the last thing I want you to do is to go through and to talk about what are those things that you feel like you need to work on or that you're insecure about. Pretend it's that, I don't know what, that stock ridiculous like interview question of like, so what do you think you need to work on, or what could you be better at? Look, I understand the question, but in this case, it might actually be useful for something. But that's what I want you to be able to do, is to talk about what are those things that you think you need to work on and what are the things you're insecure about. And I want you to do that once. And then what I want you to be able to do is to go back. And I want you to do it again. But this time, don't lie. Don't exaggerate, and don't leave things out. Because that's what we often do, are the things that maybe we're ashamed of, the thing that we think maybe other people aren't going to be impressed by, the thing that we think that almost sort of like being human is going to be a problem. Well, I think those are the things that we tend to leave out. But that's what I want you to be able to do, is to go back and do it again, and this time don't leave those things out. Because what we're going to try to do is to look at, in the same way that we're trying to figure out what is the gap between you, who you authentically are, and again, who is that person who you think you need to be. In each one of these areas, we want to once again figure out how big is that gap. Because if there was something in your childhood, in your education, in your career, if there are those things that you're unsure of, insecure of, those sort of things that you feel like are different, that maybe aren't like everybody else, those are going to be the things that are probably going to be the things that you do need to make peace with. And part of what it is that in many cases, the past isn't going to change. Not in many cases, actually in every case. The past isn't going to change. But I think what we can do, and I think that this is where, and especially for a lot of people who are creative, and I don't just mean designers, I just mean if you create anything, this is where so many of us struggle. Because our insecurities, our design imposter syndrome, are like, all of those things are often born out of these areas. They're born out of the perceptions that we think people have of us. They're born out of our insecurities. They're born out of all these things where we feel different, like we don't fit in. And then that's the thing, is that whenever we feel that way, then we think that that's a weakness. And that weakness turns into insecurity. Insecurity turns into imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome turns into paralysis, unhappiness, and we're unsure what to do. But I think that in many cases, to start this conversation, to start this level of self-awareness, is usually the first step in coaching, in getting help, in understanding yourself, in understanding the impact that these things have on you, because this was a process that took me a really long time. This is the reason why I started the podcast. This is the reason why I do a lot of this stuff, is because I know how hard this was for me to go through. I know how insecure I was. I know how all of those things, of how hard I kept trying to be that person that I thought everybody else wanted me to be. I know how hard it was. I know how emotional it was. I know how frustrating it was. But I also know the moment whenever I stopped trying to be who I thought everybody else wanted to be, and I started being myself, that's when my career took off. That was when all those sort of things, because I could show up as myself. I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to sort of be all these other things. I could actually be myself. And how liberating that was, how great the success was that came with that. Look, it doesn't mean that I don't still have issues. It doesn't mean that I don't still have imposter syndrome and all those things. But what it means is that that weight that I was carrying around, that thing that I thought nobody else would understand, that thing that I thought separated me from everybody else, whenever I understood that that was my strength and how important that was, that's what made the difference. And I think in many cases, whenever people will hear me talk about the importance of building your brand, they get confused because they think somehow I mean a logo or a typeface or something like that, and I don't. This is what I mean. I mean, figuring yourself out. What makes you different? Why do you stand out? What are the things that you do that are better, stronger, different than everybody else? Because time and time again, as I look at portfolios and resumes and talk to people, they haven't thought about this stuff, or they are still sort of consumed by the insecurity. And so what do we do then? We become generic. We become that, who is that ideal worker? But that's the problem, is by being generic, no one is successful by being generic. Yes, hard work should count for more, but it doesn't. What counts and what really matters is that ability to stand out. What matters is that ability to have an impact, to be able to do those things, to understand that especially whenever you are creative, those differences are your strength. Those are the things that are going to make you stand out, make you have a different opinion, make you do those things. And yes, it's going to feel like that's insecure. But trust me, those are the things that are going to matter. But that's where I want you to start, is just to start by looking at that. And then find a support system, find a career coach, find a therapist, depending on sort of what the depth and size of those issues are. But find people who can start to make you aware of when you're doing these things. Find people that can help you grow and start to work through this stuff. just give yourself a break. Everybody goes through this. Everybody goes through this. This is why about 70% of leaders I coach are in therapy, because again, they are dealing with these problems. So what you're going through is not abnormal. What you're going through is not different. But the journey to solve it is going to be personal. And that's why I said, look, I can be one of these people. And there's so many talking heads in this industry who make so much money by sort of trying to sell everybody this snake oil that if you just do these two things and basically ignore all of this, that somehow you're going to be successful. Well, often the problem is that they get rich and you go nowhere. I'm just not about it. I'm not about that sort of approach. And so that's why I said is to be able to start doing those sort of things, I think is going to start to hopefully make the difference and to give you some insights as to what's going on. So once again, I think, look, these are the sort of things that I like to be able to talk about here and talk about on the podcast. I've got over 100 episodes dealing with a lot of these sort of things around leadership and creativity. So again, you can always just head over to thecrazyone.com to check out this stuff. There's going to be more videos like this. So like I said, if this is helpful, thought-provoking, interesting, hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell so you get the latest episodes whenever those come out. But I'd also love to be able to hear from you. Like in the comments, does this make sense? Is this something you've gone through? Is this a journey that you're on? I hold office hours once a month to get people together to talk about this stuff. But again, this is a conversation and you don't have to go through it alone. So reach out through the comments, show up at the office hours, reach out to me on social media, any of those sort of things. I'm here to help. But that's the thing is whenever you make peace with yourself, when you understand that those things that feel like your weakness and make you different, those are the things that are absolutely your strengths. That's the time and that's the way that you're going to be able to find that path to being happier, to feeling more accepted, and to just finding probably more success in your career and in your life. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully you're able to get something out of it. And as always, stay crazy.